Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from the second group and we would like to discuss about the linguistic operations in structuralism. And there are 6 topics for discussion in this chapter and we will discuss it one by one. My name is Azka Syifa and I would like to answer the question from number 1 to number 3. The first question is, describe the contemporary situation of humanities. So, since the humanities are very broad, there are often disagreements or maybe contradictions between the humanities with other disciplines. However, then Jonathan Culler finds out that the linguistic theory that initiated by Saussure has greatly contributed to the humanities, where his idea of signifier and signified give a rise to a new model of linguistics that called semiotic, or he calls it as semiology. And his semiology theory then began to develop and become a powerful influence since it's easy to grasp and can be applied to other domains of social and cultural life. As it's said on Jonathan Culler's essay on this book at page 52 that said, "This is one of the more important lessons that linguistics has offered other disciplines of the humanities and social science." So we can conclude that the humanities at that time began to develop because of the contributions of Saussurean linguistics. The next topic is about the significant contribution of semiotics to contemporary scholarship. As I said before, that semiotics is a new discipline, and according to Jonathan Culler, a new discipline can create a past, articulate the present, and projecting a future. So first, what it means by creating a past. Creating a past means that semiotic can be a new light and can identify or redefine the previous disciplines. For example, back then, anthropologists often fail to understand a phenomena because they take it one by one rather than treating them as a part of an underlying system with a logic of its own. But then the example of linguistics makes one of the anthropologists from French, whose name is Levi-Strauss, thinks that anthropologists should understand a phenomena by considering them as manifestation of an underlying system of relations. And the second one is articulates a present. Articulates a present means that semiotic as a new discipline has broad implication for contemporary scholarship by the question it asks and the answer it seeks. And then the last one about projecting a future. It means that by understanding today's semiotic, we can we can imagine the future. So in conclusion, we can say that the significant contribution of semiotic to the contemporary scholarship is that semiotic can be a new light to the previous disciplines. The third discussion is about the differences between Piercean semiotics and Saussurean semiotics. So according to Pierce, as cited on this book, that semiotic, as he called it, which would be the science of sciences, since the entire universe is perfused with science if it is not composed entirely of science. He also argues that science can be classified into index, symbol, and icon. Meanwhile, uh, Ferdinand de Saussure argues that semiotic is a study of sign within society, and according to him, sign consists of signifier and signified, and they are always determined by social rule and semiotic convention.
Okay, thank you to Azka Syifa for explaining the previous material. And next I will explain about Levi-Strauss. He contributed in the field of structural linguistics or structural anthropology, illustrating nicely about the principle of structuralist semiotic thought. His thought about the principle of structuralist semiotic is not inspired by Saussure, but he began with his desire to investigate the symbolic codes of society. In a famous article of 1945 entitled Structural Analysis in Linguistics and Anthropology, Levi-Strauss argues that anthropologists might learn more directly from linguistics, especially for linguistics and phonology. He stated that a speaker is not aware when they speak. They didn't concern of the phonological system of their own language. So, from the unconsciousness emerged the science of phonology, which study the sound of language to distinguish among sequences which are acoustically very similar. For example, is cat. We can pronounce cat in various ways, as long as we can distinguish between how to pronounce cat, but, cat, and cad. In the next slide, there is Strauss' contribution to structural anthropology. We can see that Strauss' study of marriage rules in the elementary structure of kinship, discussion about various logic in the savage mind, and his monumental four-volume study of North and South American mythology. The savage mind and totemism argue that anthropologists have often failed to understand the thought and behavior of their subject because they have attempted atomistic and functionalist explanation, taking phenomena one by one rather than treating them as a part of underlying system. If we can illustrate, clan A is descended from birds and clan B is descended from eagles, it is quite make an analogy that clan A and B are relationship between two species as a sign of system. No need to be associated with religion, politics, economic, and etc. Next slide. Strauss gives another example of relationship between raw and cooked. If we can illustrate it, before the food is cooked, the food is raw and then undergoes a process of change by cooking. This process is called the cultural process, namely by cooking. These categories are related to each other and make them useful logical tools for expressing other relations. So, in his announcement, Levi-Strauss saw anthropology as a part of semiology because there is pursuit of sign, and the sign in his work is a problem of complexity. Move to another slide. Is talking about contribution of semiotic in literary criticism. Semiotic can be separated from critic semiotic because in its development, semiotic must theorize about object, method, and the relationship between semiotics itself so that it turns to its own theory of scientific practice. So the best way to illustrate semiotics is with literature, because in literature there is a very complex science of system. And the result of semiotic perspective in literary criticism is the novel of Madame Bovary and the poem of London. When we want to interpret the novel or poem, we have to position ourselves as readers, because the next slide explains that Barthes, in his literary study, mentioned the death of author. In other words, the reader is the center in interpreting a literary work to obtain meaningful sign. Because literary work to have meaning for readers, meanwhile semiotic undertakes to describe the system of convention responsible for those meanings. The last slide is how can be semiotic considered as a critic of the logocentric assumption. Semiotic begins as a critic of the logocentric assumption that concept exists prior to and independently of the expression. In analyzing signification, Saussure and his followers argue that the forms and concepts do not exist independently, but that the sign consists of the union of a signifier and signified. Moreover, both signifiers and signifies are purely relational entities, product of a system of differences. I think that's all from me. Thank you.